Welcome to another episode of Money You Should Ask. I'm your host, Bob Wheeler, and in this episode, we're going to explore, question, examine, converse, dig deep, expose, laugh, and cry about the money beliefs, money blocks, and life challenges of our next guest. Turn up the volume, listen, learn, and laugh. I'd like to thank our sponsor, The Money Nerve, a financial resource that helps you have a healthier relationship with money. Do you feel shame around your past financial decisions? Do you feel alone in your financial struggles? Do you self-sabotage your potential financial successes? Do you keep making the same choices, expecting different results? The Money Nerve has just launched a new online course called The Course to Financial Freedom. To learn more, go to themoneynerve.com/course. The Money Nerve has an offer to all Money You Should Ask listeners for a 25% discount on the course. Use code MYSA, all caps, 25, and start your course to financial freedom now. Well, I feel really honored today. We've got a great guest. Scott Henderson comes to us. He started a company called Simplifinances. Did I get it right?
You did.
Close. All right. I got it. See, it's not a simple. It's simple, but it's not simple.
It should be simpler.
It should be simpler. He created this to help other people get financial literacy. The thing about Scott, he grew up in a broken home. His dad left when he was 8. Grew up with a single mom, raising 4 kids. At one point, they were homeless, living on food stamps, and all of his possessions fit in a single shoebox. And it's sort of a good times to bad times to abundant times kind of story because he gets to rise again. And I think this is, we'll jump into this. And Scott, thanks for being here. I feel like your story is something that a lot of people can resonate with.
Yeah, Bob, I'm excited to be here. I'm grateful that you guys invited me on the podcast to share my story. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things, in your bio and on your website, and people can see this, you're sort of living the good life, right? A superficial, maybe good life, but had the toys and everything. And then it took an about face and sort of things went south. And from this, you say that you had a belief that you wanted to be rich, that if you had more money, that would just make you happy and all your problems would go away. And probably found out that that's not necessarily true. But welcome, and please tell us a little bit about how that was to seemingly have it all as a 8-year-old kid. Life is sort of good. And then overnight, seemingly it's not the same.
Yeah. So the household I grew up in as a toddler, things were good. I mean, and I didn't obviously understand any problems. If there were problems going on at the time, life just was good. I was happy and I just wanted to go outside and play, right? But from the outside looking in, most people would have thought that we lived a pretty lavish life. We had a lot of possessions. We had a big house that we lived in. My dad owned a share of a houseboat in Lake Powell. He owned an airplane. He had a whole bunch of toys and he was buying a new truck every year. And wow. Everybody in my family that's older than me, they saw that and they're like, oh my gosh, he must make so much money in excavation is what he did. And so that's kind of the household I was raised in. But about the time I was 8, everything came crashing down. So my dad, it took about a year, but he ultimately left. And when he left, I didn't see him again for a long, long time. And what ended up happening is we continued to live in the same house. It was a big house with my mom and my 4 siblings. And my mom was like, I can't afford to make this house payment by myself. And so she's like, I guess I'll just see how long I can stay here in this house without paying the mortgage.
Right.
And so she just kind of waited to see what would happen. And it went by 18 months before the bank came and knocked on our door and said, it's time for you guys to go. Yeah. And at that time I was young. I didn't really understand what was going on, but I remember that last night at the house, my mom kind of sweeping up the garage and then putting the broom in the van, and we just kind of drove away and
Yeah.
thinking like, okay, we're never going to see this place again. And it was sad because that's where I was at the first 8 years of my life. And so it seemed like we had everything. And then after like a year, all of a sudden, we're just like, we don't even know where to go. And my mom literally didn't have anywhere to go. And so we ended up living at my grandma's house for a little while, probably close to a year, while she tried to get back on her feet. And ultimately, I got a taste from a really young age of what it's like to have a lot and then go really quick to feeling like you have nothing. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I would think, I mean, I don't know, but I think like there's probably a much more appreciation for like seeing that you had it and then you didn't have it versus the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I think so.
do you remember, like, did your grandmother make any comments? Do you remember, like, was your mom like, "Hey, it's going to be all right," or was there any discussion or with the kids, or was it just like full steam ahead?
Yeah, so my mom, she's very driven. And I think at the time, she didn't really understand what was going on. Like, she had to file for bankruptcy, both my parents did. And that really caused her to like wake up and
Yeah.
realize, like, okay, this was a big shock to her life.
Mhm.
And she wasn't expecting to be in her late 20s, early 30s, filing bankruptcy, starting over. And so she was really determined to get us out of it.
Yeah.
And sort of take that onto herself and say, look, I could just be a victim of my circumstances and just lay down and give up. Or I can sort of say, how can I be better? And how can I teach my kids so that they'll have a future that that I don't, because she's had to live with those consequences her whole life.
Yeah.
So, and then the conversations, with my grandma, like, I'm very grateful that she was willing to let us come in and live with her. But it wasn't easy. Like, my grandma would have to take us to school some mornings because my mom was working, and she's a massage therapist. And so it was really hard, but she was determined to get us out of that slump.
What was the biggest takeaway from watching your mom, from going to homeless to starting to rebuild? What was the biggest takeaway for you?
So the biggest takeaway for me was that I didn't realize this till I was probably in my teenage years, because as a teenager growing up as, in a single family household, like, I didn't realize what my mom was going through till a little bit later, and how hard that must have been. Because like I said at the beginning, I was 8. I didn't really understand what was going on, but it wasn't until later when I realized like what actually happened and how that has affected us. And so I started to really realize in my teenage years that what my mom went through was really difficult, and it's amazing what she's been able to do to get herself and get us out of it and sort of help us get on the right path. So I think the main thing is just, you don't have to be a victim of your circumstances. You can decide what you want your life to be like. And she's definitely instilled that desire to do what's right and to be the best you can be. And so I was very driven as a teenager to be successful, because I wanted to prove to the world that, I'm going to change this. I'm not going to stay in poverty, and I'm going to get myself out of it. And so probably about the age, 14, 15, I realized like, I want to be smart with my money. I want to work hard. And even before that, like, I got my first job working construction when I was 13. And I would, during the summer, every year, I would wake up at 5 a.m. and I'd be in Park City, Utah, building some of those big houses up there the whole summer. And I did that for 3 years. And I just learned to work hard. And I don't know if I would have had that same drive if things would have continued the way they were and we kept living a lavish lifestyle. I think I would have just been given everything and
Yeah.
kind of just been spoiled, to be honest.
Yeah. And in that place where you said, I'm going to not be a victim of my circumstance, I'm going to go out and be super successful, was there any kind of like vow that you made, or any kind of, just something that maybe like, I'm never going to let this happen again, or I'm going to prove people wrong, or like, was there something that was driving that?
For sure. I would definitely say I was not a normal high school kid.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, I was focused on sports and all that kind of stuff, but I could care less about my classes. Like I didn't excel in high school. I would rather take time and, figure out how to personally develop and read like self-help books and read personal finance books. So when I was 16, I read Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker.
Mm-hmm.
And that just like totally opened up my mind that like, okay, I have the power to do something with my life, and it starts in my mind.
Yeah.
And he goes through these different exercises on how to train your mind. And so like at 16, I was just really very driven to like, I'm going to be rich, and so I would do some of those exercises. And I mean, even to the point when in high school where most kids would, be doing whatever high school kids do, I made a video. It was a 1-minute PSA on financial literacy when I was 16. And my senior year of high school, I entered it into the Utah High School Film Festival, and I ended up taking second place in
Wow.
the financial literacy division. And that was a $2,700 scholarship to the college of my choice. And I was like, just super interested in that kind of stuff. I wasn't ever planning on working in the industry, but it was just a big interest of mine because like I know what it was like to be poor, and I was doing everything I could to like be smart with my money and help other people too.
That's awesome. How did you know, or when did you know that, oh, you know what, I'm going to be okay? Like, when did that first, like, oh, my bank account's actually got some money in it? Or, like, was there a moment when you went, yeah, it's going to be okay?
I've always felt pretty confident in my personal financial situation. Like obviously growing up, there was things I couldn't control, but in that book that I read when I was 16, he talks about a money management system. Mm-hmm. And he used jars as a metaphor. And so when I was 16, I went to Walmart and I bought 6 jars. And every time I got paid cash, I would divide up my cash into these different jars. And I did that for about 2 years. And so there wasn't any like big moment where I was like, I'm going to be okay. Like I'm going to make it. It's been little incremental steps. Whereas like every single time I got paid, like I'd put 10% towards financial freedom and 10% towards like education. And it's just kind of built since then. So like,
yeah.
My savings account and my retirement and things, because I started at a young age, I feel like I'm confident. But there's been plenty of times in my 20s where I'm like, I'm not there. Like I can't do this. I'm never going to be successful. And there's just, but you go through, I feel like, phases.
So, say a little bit more about the jars. Like, I love this. I used envelopes, but same concept. I like jars because you can see everything. But tell us a little bit about what that's about.
Yeah, so I really caught on to that system when I was younger, and my friends thought I was like crazy, but they're like, oh, that's cool. You can divide up your money into different jars. And so the main jar was the necessities, and it was 50% of my income goes to my necessities. So that's transportation, housing, food, things that you need in order to live. And then I committed at that point that I would save 10% of every dollar that I made for the rest of my life, or at least until I become retired. And I've pretty much done that.
Okay.
And then 10% goes towards long-term savings. So that's things like a down payment on a house or some other asset that you can purchase in the near future.
Okay.
10% goes towards play. So you got to have balance. I feel like if you're just focused on saving, like you're never going to enjoy your life, right?
Right.
And so you got to set aside some money to blow and just have fun. And so it's non-guilty spending. And then the last 10% goes towards education. So while I was in school, I would use that money to help pay for tuition. And then now basically I use it to invest in myself. So I'll purchase books or courses or things like that. But I plan to continue to invest in my future that way.
Okay. And then do you budget any money towards charity?
Sorry, that was the other 10%.
Okay. I was just checking.
Yeah, I was thinking I had 100%, but I only gave you 90% of the money. Yep. So the last 10% goes towards tithing. I do tithe.
Mm-hmm. And so if you don't mind, because I think this stuff is important, why is tithing and charity important for you?
So that's a good question. So the way I look at it is when I'm in the position to give and I actually give, I will receive more.
Yeah.
So and I've seen that countless number of times in my life where if I'm just like, oh, I don't make enough money to give, typically I have a different mentality, and it's kind of like a scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
But when I give, I've kind of come at things from an abundance mentality, and I'm like, you know what, I'm fortunate and I'm blessed enough to be in a position to give to a church, to give to other causes that I care about. And I think it's empowering. I think it helps you align, your priorities and what's important in life. And so, 10% of what I earn goes towards causes that I care about. And so it's not even like it was ever my money. So when I pay, it's just like, it's no big deal to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a very important component. And I would agree that you almost get tenfold of what you give comes back to you. So, and I do think I agree that it is coming from an abundant mindset. I know there've been a couple of times where money was a little tight, and I know I committed to this giving, but it's one of those things for me. It's a top priority too. That if I'm committed to giving and helping others, because my life has been pretty good. I probably mentioned this on other podcasts, but I have a friend who's a comic who doesn't always have a lot of money. But if she sees a homeless person, if she sees anybody in need, she pulls out a $20 bill. And I'll say, you don't have any money. She goes, my life is better than theirs right now. Yeah. And I'm in a position to give because I've got to come from a place of gratitude. And that's how I'm going to live my life. And it really helped me to just keep reaffirming that, yes, coming from a place of gratitude and abundance is just a healthier mindset for me.
Yeah.
What would you say is your biggest what's your biggest financial worry right now?
That's a good question. So me personally, I've never really had a goal to be debt free or, to make in the past, I thought it was to make a lot of money. Like that was the goal and I would be happy.
Yeah.
But it's changed. I don't think that way anymore. My biggest worry is how it's shifted for me over the past 10 years is it's not so much about making a lot of money as it is getting to a point in my life where work becomes optional. So I want to get to the point where, I have enough investable assets or passive income coming in that covers my basic living expenses, and we can enjoy life and not feel like I'm stuck in the rat race.
Right.
And so for me, it's will I ever get to that point? And I think I'm still in my 20s, and I think sometimes it's hard to have that long-term perspective of okay, I just got to be patient. It's the hardest at the beginning, but it will get easier. And, hopefully one day we will get to that point.
Yeah. Do you find there's any place where you still financially self-sabotage yourself? There you go. I know I shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I feel like over the past couple of years, I've been married 5 years. I've got a 2-year-old son. and we've got another baby on the way in November. So like I'm shifting into this other phase of life. And what I've found is it's definitely not as easy as like the early days when I could just control everything
Right.
myself. And so like trying to find balance. And so what I've found is like we do try hard to be good budgeters and do all that kind of stuff, but we're really not that great at budgeting. Like we're pretty good at tracking what we spend, but we'll go throughout the month and we'll just kind of buy what we need. And at the end of the month, we'll be like, oh man, we spent too much here, or we spent too much there. Like we need to really do better next time. And so those are some things I feel like we really do want to budget, but sometimes we're not the best at it.
Yeah. No, I understand that. What is how do you feel about taking vacation time, and do you take time off?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because it's super important to take time off. Like I feel like going back to that point I made about the play jar.
Yeah.
If you are only focused on work, and saving, like that can be really constricting, not only for yourself, but in your relationships. And nobody really likes to be married to a tightwad, you know? And so like I'm probably classified in that group, but I do try hard to set aside not only money but time to do those things that are important. So like when we do go on vacation, like I go on vacation. Like I'm not trying to be cheap on vacation. My wife's always like why do you want to buy all this stuff on vacation? It's like because that's why I work so hard. That's why I save money for these types of things. And so when I do go on vacation, like when I take work off, like I try to tune out completely and just take that time to enjoy it as much as possible and just spend money and not feel guilty about it.
So I know so you use the word tightwad. Would you consider yourself more tightwad, frugal, cheap? Or are they all the same?
They're definitely not the same. I like to consider myself as a frugal person. Like I don't like to be cheap. I don't really like that word because I'm willing to splurge and spend on things that I value.
Yeah.
So like the way I like to look at myself is like a valuist. So like I'm willing to spend money on things that I value, and I'm way willing to pay for something that costs me more, knowing that it's going to be cheaper in the long run. So like sometimes my wife too, she'll even be like, hey, let's just get these new kitchen chairs. They're like $40. And I'm just like, that's great. But like, you know, that's good that they're cheap, but like, will they hold up for as long as we want them to? And are they good? And will we like them for a long time? Like I'd rather spend extra money now knowing that the value they'll provide for the rest of my life is actually more. So that's the way I kind of think about it.
And what is something that you really value and you would be willing to spend a lot of money on?
Sleep.
Sleep? A nice bed?
Yes. Actually, we spent way too much on a bed about 2 years ago, and it was the best money we've ever spent. So, and it wasn't cheap.
No, that's
and
awesome.
The other thing is my health. Like
your health.
I spend a good amount of money on, you know, gym every month and supplements and vitamins and that kind of stuff too. Like, so, but there's other things in my life where I'm like, I could care less. Like, I don't care to have a fancy, nice car. My car has 200,000 miles on it, and I just need it to get me from point A to point B. So, so that's kind of why I wouldn't consider myself cheap, but you know, what do I prioritize, and where am I going to put my dollars?
How often do you and your wife talk about money?
Probably every day.
Okay.
In some, either directly or indirectly, like it gets brought up at some point. And I feel like my wife and I have a pretty good relationship when it comes to finances. We're not as good as we used to be, but when we first got married, you know, we'd meet once a month and we'd review our spending, and we'd talk about our goals, and we would, you know, talk about the future. We don't do it as much anymore, but what we do that I love is once a year we'll get away around like New Year's time and just go on like a weekend vacation, and that's really the time that we'll look at like where our goals and our spending and all that kind of stuff. So we've kind of taken a step back and we look at it more from a big picture. And I try to, on a daily basis, I try to not be the controlling spouse, like obviously I'm the one that's interested in personal finance, and she kind of came from a background where her parents did very well and they're still together, and she comes from a great family and has never had to worry about needing anything. She's always been provided for. So we do have that different dynamic in our relationship, but I think it strengthens us. And every day we're talking about something to do with money, especially right now. We're buying a house next month, and so there's a lot of conversations around that.
Yeah, that can be fun and scary and frustrating all at the same time.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing. So if your wife were not listening to this podcast and she wouldn't know, are there places that you spend money that she might not know about?
No. I really don't think there is. And we've had this conversation even just a couple weeks ago. Like, I don't hide anything from her. Like, because I don't want her to hide anything from me.
Yeah.
And she's very open and honest about it. And so like, I can trust her completely that I know, like I would know if she tried to spend money anywhere. That's the problem, but she wouldn't. Right. If I did try to go spend some money somewhere, like I could totally get away with it. She would never know. But I try not to be that way. I think the biggest thing is probably books on Amazon, but I use gift cards for those. So it doesn't really affect our personal finances.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, I think, I love that answer. And I think, I think it's important that people understand that if you're hiding things financially, what else are you hiding? And to have a solid relationship, being able to be transparent, being able to bear it all, so to speak, it's really just says something for the strength of the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say we've got a pretty good relationship, and I do try to tie her into the finances as much as possible. So like we will still meet regularly, and we'll go over Mint, and we'll talk about, some of the expenses, and we'll categorize it and everything. So she's on board. So like if I was spending money somewhere that I wasn't supposed to be, I'd probably show up somewhere in Mint.
If money were no object, absolutely no object, what would you change about your life?
It's a hard question to answer because I feel like it can change. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, if money wasn't an option, it would be spending time with my loved ones, like my wife and my son and soon to be daughter. Like, that's really where my whole focus has gone, is how can I be a good dad? How can I provide for these kids? And I feel like even if I had all the money in the world, I would still want to instill in them a desire to work hard, to save their money, and to, do the things that I learned as a kid, as far as like what it takes to, to follow your dreams and to follow your goals. And it takes hard work. And so if money was an option, I think the biggest thing, like not a whole lot would change in my life, honestly. And I think I would still drive my same car. Like maybe I'd have a nicer car that was more reliable, but like that wouldn't be a huge focus of mine. We'd live in a modest home. We'd eat out once or twice a week. I don't know. And just try to focus on giving. I think going back to that point is, if I did have more time and more opportunities to give, I would devote more of my time to that.
Yeah. What beliefs do you still have about money that you carried over from childhood? And do they serve you, or are they sometimes a block?
Yeah, so I would say the two biggest things for me are like what I learned when I was younger. So the biggest thing was just that money doesn't grow on trees. Like I thought it did.
Yeah.
And then I learned that it didn't. And then the other thing is just my limiting belief that I am, capable of providing value and being compensated accordingly, like making good money. And I think sometimes I can limit myself and say like, oh, I don't want to charge people for my services because like maybe I'm not totally confident in myself, But as a kid, I remember being in Walmart and there was this box of Legos. It was like this castle. It was like medieval, and they were like the coolest Legos I'd ever seen. And this was about the time my dad left, and he had to tell me no. And he's like, no, we're not going to buy those. And I flipped out. I was like, no, like I want them. And left the Walmart just like kicking and screaming, because in the past, like, sure, yeah, we'll just buy you Legos. I had Legos, and it was like the first time he told me no. And I was like, what? And I think at that point, that's when I kind of realized like, wait, money isn't like, it just doesn't grow on trees. Like you have to work for it. And at that point I'm like, okay, well, if I have to work for it, like where do I start? And so I started doing things at a young age to like sell Papa Murphy cards, like door to door, or like sell candy on the street, like literally at like a young age. And so today, like I've focused a lot of my time and attention on being successful and making a lot of money. But then on the flip side, I feel like an internal struggle I have is like, oh, well, maybe I'm not good enough, and should I be charging enough money? So that's been a struggle of mine, is like, obviously we want to make more, but you can't limit your beliefs, and you got to be confident in what you do, and that you can charge accordingly, whatever profession you're in.
Yeah. What legacy do you want to leave for your kids? Your financial legacy.
Yeah, so I think it was Warren Buffett that said when he dies, he doesn't want to, maybe it wasn't him, but he doesn't want to leave a cent to his kids or something.
That's him.
Is that him?
Yeah.
I told that to my wife, and she's like, are you kidding me? That's like crazy. But who knows? I probably won't like not leave anything to my kids if I was to pass. But I think the message is important, that I don't want them to, whatever success I obtain in my life, I don't want them to lean on me, and sort of take advantage of that. I want to instill in them to sort of carry on the legacy, whatever that is. So if in my life I'm able to obtain some amount of success, setting up, a foundation or like a donor advised fund or that type of stuff that can perpetuate after I'm gone, that continues to still have an impact on the friends and family and the organizations that I care about, that even though I'm not here, what's the continuing impact that I can have for the next 2 or 3 generations, I think is really important to me. So I would say most people don't like to think about death, but I think about it quite a bit, because I'm like, how do I want to live my life, and what legacy do I want to leave behind? And so trying to maintain that long-term perspective, I think is important.
Absolutely. And I'm going to ask you this final question. What was the biggest gift you received from your mom in terms of watching her push through all of the adversity that came her way, and then surviving and then thriving? What was the biggest gift that you got from all that?
I think the biggest thing is just work ethic. I really do think that the desire she planted in my heart to work hard has really paid off, and I think will continue to pay off. And I saw that, and I learned that from her. And I know that like she had to do what she had to do, and she probably wishes she could go back and spend more time with us, but she worked her butt off and she got us out. And she's still single, but she owns multiple rental properties. She's got a successful business, and she's done all of it by herself. And so that's been very, in my eyes, admirable. And so it's the work ethic and then the desire that, she's planted in my heart to sort of take that and pass it on to my family and my kids, and how I can help them. So I would say work ethic is really important.
Yeah, that's awesome. So where can people find you on social media to learn more about your story, to learn more about financial literacy?
Yeah, so you can find me on simplifinances.com. There I write about financial independence and simplifying your life and just how to live a meaningful life, because it's not so much about how much money you make, it's what do you do with the money that you have. And so you can find me there. You can also connect with me on Instagram. I'm at Simplifinances. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can find me Scott T. Henderson on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we'll get some people coming to you and getting some love around financial literacy. So I appreciate that. And I want to just say to our listeners, don't forget to share the love. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Search for Money You Should Ask, all one word. And you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast player. Scott, and I have to say, we're connected through FinCon. Mm-hmm. And which got canceled this year, but I just want to do a shout out to FinCon. FinCon's been an amazing organization of people helping other people around financial literacy, and there's so many different areas of financial literacy that people are inspired by. So a big shout out to FinCon. And that's how I know that we got to connect. So I appreciate that. And Scott, I so appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and being a little vulnerable. And, I wish you much success with the baby and the house and like all those good things that are to come.
Yeah, I appreciate it and super glad I got the chance to come on here, and I'm bummed that I won't be able to see you at FinCon this year. We got the message that it was canceled, but we'll see you in Austin, Texas next year. So
absolutely. I'll see you there.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.